We are in this together.
You have gifts that I don't have, and I have gifts that you don't have.
That we must see. Now is the time, because it's when we all get together that we will make the changes that we must make. We are the world.
Welcome to Malcolm and We, heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com, a streaming platform heard actually around the world and beyond. We're not sure where beyond is. And I'm going to let Yana take over. Now you can talk, Yana.
Thank you, Malcolm. Our guest today is Adam Abraham, also known as Vortex Guy. And these are his words that he sent me, which I find very profound. So I'm just going to read them. This is from Adam. For over 40 years, I have studied the nature of spirituality and role of consciousness in the formation and consequently change of reality. I have authored 2 books and many booklets and created several tools that facilitate the we vision. Turning I consciousness into we consciousness is an inside job. Indeed, a strong I consciousness in each individual is what gives strength to the we. Imagine 8 billion people simply thinking love. The 80 million or so who profit from the inertia of old habits of thinking would have to adjust. We are a people who live in various degrees of blindness as to our very nature, as well as to how we create our now and our power to consciously create a qualitatively different one. Thousands of years of repetitive, unquestioned thinking is not going to change in an instant, but I'll suggest that the change for the better is already happening, and we're here to accelerate it. Welcome, Adam, Vortex Guy.
Thank
Your
you.
words were just so great. I didn't see a reason to change them. So thank you for being here. And as we talked about before the show, this is a kickoff for the MLK awareness campaign that many of us nonprofit organizations are undertaking from now on through the end of February, including We the World, Unify Earth, Humanity Rising, Humanity's Team, Consciousness Games, One Earth, or One World. I forget, there's so many. So thank you for being here. And I know you've written along those lines, but you can talk about anything you'd like to talk about.
Well, the thing about it is I have been writing along these lines for many years. I was, needless to say, touched by, I was, you could say I was present on this particular plane when Dr. King was present, so to speak, and when he made his abrupt exit from this level as well. And his wasn't the only abrupt exit in that particular year. And when people make those exits, it does have an impact on everyone that witnesses, that is touched by in some kind of way. And it has an effect on, because of how we think, how we feel about those things, it also has an impact even on our sense of ourself. And so that being the case, it's been part of my, I'm just going to say, ethos to frankly understand what is the process, what is the, what's the nature, because you could say, why are we here? And when you start asking that question, you got to then say, who are we? What are we? Okay. These are the fundamental questions that, quite frankly, science cannot answer, because science don't know. There's no such thing as science, actually.
Pardon me for breaking in, but what is your background? I mean,
I'm a human being.
No, did you study this or you evolved?
Words limit. I am here, and what my background is will show up through what I say and what
Okay.
comes out now. And the interesting thing is that as a society, as a culture, we have we are focused on the observable and the measurable. But ultimately, we, you, me, us, we are unobservable. We're immeasurable. What is infinity? Infinity is all possibility. We have an infinitude of potential, and as soon as we put them into words, it locks in. It narrows down the possibilities, and the possibilities are not narrowed down by the person. Is narrowed down by the observer. Okay. So if I say I graduated right now, to say I graduated from Harvard University, right, frankly, would not be um, a compliment. It would not be reason to be confident of. And I just picked Harvard out for some specific things, or recently. Okay, when you start looking at the thinking that is associated with higher education, for example, even with science, is limited, and it is actually off track. Science is not about truth. Science typically is about keeping a paycheck. All right. And so if we do, and many of the things that we do in our society today is about keeping a flow of income or getting one versus love, versus being truthful, versus being confident within ourselves. We have literally turned our attention away from what's important. That means life. That's you, that's me, that's us. And we have actually convinced ourselves that we are powerless to do things, that someone who has credentials can do this and figure these things out that we can't. Big mistake. And what we have as a society, as many ways of doing things, is a result of this. Someone said something about a comedy of errors, but this is a tragedy of errors. And ultimately, unless we recognize the tragedy of the errors that we continue to do today, we just continue to create them. So I use words not sparingly. I mean, hell, I probably talk too much for most people. Okay. But the things that trigger folks, where they're giving you this information for you to listen to them and stuff like that, I don't do that stuff.
Yeah,
If what I say doesn't touch your heart, it's not my problem. Okay.
well, well said. I'm not asking to credentials
I know.
to validate, your existence, because I think everybody has an existence that's validated into itself,
I
and
agree.
I do feel that a lot of things that happen to us we have absolutely no control of. We can only live the best way possible with the circumstances. We can't change the circumstances.
We can learn. These are opportunities to learn about ourselves. We can change our response to the circumstances. However, most of the time we think we cannot change that thing because we want it to morph right off the wishing of it. Okay. And we oftentimes we allow ourselves to go into certain traps that are set for our thinking. Okay. And if we haven't established some levels of awareness and discernment within ourselves, we'll go right into those traps, and we will be blind and ignorant and nonplussed when something hits us upside the head that we didn't see coming. And
Right.
yet
Well,
it's right. Mhm,
I agree with you to a certain extent.
mhm.
I mean, this show is not about you and me. I just want to find out what you're doing, but I just want to let you know where I'm coming from.
Sure.
It's There's certain things that are beyond our control. I mean, I know I'm looking at politics in the U.S. I cannot understand why certain people think that way, and no matter how much I try, they're not going to change their thinking, and they're going to go along a certain way. And it's, what is the truth? I don't know what the truth is anymore.
Okay.
Uh,
These is, I'm
and I
sorry.
can't control their thinking or their patterns and what they do. And this is
Nor
like
nor
around
should
the
you.
world.
We can disagree with people, with other people's thinking, but ultimately it's their thinking to be thought. Ultimately, the one we can is our own. And ultimately, many times we ourselves are actually operating in the thinking of someone else anyway. For example, the idea, I don't know what we can talk about and not, but because you're recording and because you can edit, we can talk, right?
We can talk about a lot of things. We just can't use anything because we're doing on YouTube. We can't use any profanities.
All right. Okay. I caught myself once there, so that's good. But there's a question about what is profane. I mean, you mentioned the word, but what is actually profane? I would suggest something that is profane is when ideas are put out into the consciousness of society that are absolutely without actual truthful basis, and yet because they have been monetized and incentivized through those ways, they're put out with no problem. On the other hand, they will withhold the ability to monetize if you put others, and profanity or not. I can speak like Shirley Temple for those people who might remember what a Shirley Temple consciousness might have been. I can speak that way and yet say some things that are totally truthful, and it would actually be reason to pull a channel down, all those things. So there's been a flip in our social thinking, which allows us to pursue the meaningless and champion that, and to suppress the meaningful. And so I get what you're saying. I understand that. And yet it's incumbent upon each person to seek to know for themselves. Belief is no longer an option. It frankly never has been. Belief is something you accept, that someone has told you, and you don't question anymore. And that's the end of evolution if you stop at believing. The issue is about knowing, and we have, in a certain way of speaking, disincentivized people from knowing. People don't want to really know anything because they have some conflicts with a religious, or they have conflicts with credentials of our society. Because how do you know this? Well, I've spent the time and effort to learn, and also to exercise my own reasoning abilities, which are abilities that everyone has. And if we don't use the gifts that are given to us, we pay the price in something called consequence. And that's what we're doing right now as a society, as a world society. And yet we can change it all. But it won't be by looking at what someone else is doing or how someone else is thinking. I can know how they're thinking and realize it's incompatible with how I think. But ultimately, I have to live with every choice I make throughout my life, whether someone else suggested it or not. And the same applies to you. We will create our life based on those choices we make. And I created something, which I'll share as we get to know each other. I mean, I appreciate we're getting acquainted, and I suspect that we will get to know each other well. But I created something called a map of consciousness. And
I was going to ask you about that. I was just looking on your tools here, and I was very intrigued about what that is.
well, I call it a device, but essentially it's a file at this point. It's a chart. I call it a psi chart, PSI chart. And
Ah,
essentially it is a tool for self-assessment. So essentially all you have to do is just look at it, and you start seeing these words all set in an arrangement, and it'll have some weighted values associated with these words. And in the center is I am. And when anything that we put the words I am to is for us. Okay. And the thing about it is, though, we have passed from generations to generations many concepts that were themselves out of context with, and out of phase with reality, with actuality. So people question whether there's something called a God, or they think that this something called a God is something other than themselves. It's not me. We cannot ever suggest that we ourselves are actually sentient beings that are essentially flames, sparks, whatever you want to say. We are units of God, is what we are. And we are each imbued with the ability to create. And the summation of that is our experience from before your first breath to after your last. You are creating your experience as I am creating mine. And there are 8 billion people here, beings who are embodied right now on this planet, and no two life streams are the same. So ultimately, instead of focusing on and worrying about how someone else is thinking, uh, I would have said, I don't care anymore. Ultimately, it's more important is what I am thinking, and I am true to that, because we have given up truth as a medium of transaction between us. Okay, generally speaking, truth and joy and courage and those type of things are optional and generally non-existent for many of the transactions or interactions that we have. And you can't have a good quality or high quality of life if these things aren't even a part of it. And we've been so accustomed to it that we've actually stopped noticing it and taking exception to that.
I imagine that's what you wrote in your booklet that you have titled on kindliness and godliness, modeling the great power within.
Yes, we have to embody that which we seek to have. And if
Yes,
we're in fear, I'll tell you right now, we're not embodying it, because fear is not
right.
part of it. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So many people want they want this to happen, they want this to happen because they're afraid of this. And the folks who are sitting and putting these ideas out, that's exactly what you want. Fear is a low state of consciousness. All right.
And it's a divider. It's a
Exactly.
divider.
It's dissipative. It's like radioactivity. If you really want something to happen, the last thing you have to do and must do is fear. Well, it's actually not the last. There's some worse things that you can be, okay? But
Right.
my point basically is not the neighborhood that you want to be in, and it's not the reason why you want others to do things. So
Exactly.
so ultimately, what others do or want to do is not important, except if what they want to do is in frequency, is in harmonic resonance with what you want to do. We
Like
have
when
to.
you said if eight, let's see, let me find in my notes here. If 80, imagine 8 billion people simply thinking love. Wow,
It will change.
that is
It
cosmic.
it will change. And see, this the thing about that. There are examples throughout history of people who chose to simply be loving and be
Right.
channels for love. Every one of the 8.8 plus billion people on this planet are channels for love. We couldn't be here unless love was flowing through us to some degree, one way or another. To some people,
Yes.
it's a trickle. To some people, it's a stream. Okay. But if unless love was there, I mean, even hatred essentially is love that's been flipped. That
Exactly.
you could say the polarity. Okay, it has been reversed
Hmm.
on it. Okay, and the person, they still are coming. All of this is necessary. If we didn't have the people whose actions befuddle us, we couldn't exist. If they don't exist, we don't exist. If they don't exist, God doesn't exist. Everything that exists has a reason, and its existence is, first of all, the evidence of its reasonability. Okay, but ultimately, how do we change things? We
Well, it's
either
positivity, isn't it? It's positivity. If you think with love and you really really truly believe that, then everything is positive and everything looks different and everything can be different. And that is just as true as those who say, oh, it's all about hate and anger and divisiveness and all that. No, I mean, if you think positively, happily, with love, that will happen. It will be what you see, what you feel, what you live.
I give you an example. My grandmother, when I was in single digits, okay, had been here. I hadn't been there long, but I was primarily raised by my mom and my grandmother. They were my primary, uh, they were my parents, if you will. My dad had a positive effect too, but this story is about my grandmother. And I was one loved boy. Okay, grew up in Chicago. And if you were someone that had gone to one of those big schools of higher learning and stuff like that, I would have been categorized. I would have been named. So words would have been used to associate with the being that I was. And because of their expertness, that was going to be the way it's going to be. Okay, so therefore, broken home might have been a word, you know, two women that raised me. Um, Gosh, urban, okay, all those things.
It's all those labels that
Uh,
appear to be
well,
negative.
you start looking at the quality of those. They were that, okay. They would simply suggest a certain track of potential,
That
okay,
your life is somehow inferior in your
or going to
experience.
be, because they don't
Yeah,
do say that they project, and the child that doesn't know better, many of them listen to that crap, okay,
exactly.
and then they
But if
live it
they're
out.
love, then
Okay, so
it's different.
in my case, I knew I was loved. My grandmother, my mother, they loved me to Dickens. Okay, and there was never a question about that. So what basically happened though, because I knew I was loved and everything else, I was also to some extent complacent about certain things, and to the
Mhm.
point that when people either they would do something for me, or more importantly, when others might do something for me that was actually nice and genuine and generous, so to speak, um, I just accepted it and went on about my business. Okay. And so eventually my grandmother, noticing this, she suggested, say thank you, and say thank you when this happens. And being my
Practice gratitude.
exactly. Being my grandmother within our own dynamic, she didn't have to say it twice. She didn't have to tell me, with emphaticness, etc., or I'm going to do this kind of stuff. She just told me what to do. And because of that was our relationship, I started doing it. In the beginning, they were just words. But as I continued to do it, because I did do it, I respected her, I loved her. So I respected and I did what she asked me to do, what she suggested. I knew she was telling me to do something for my benefit. Okay. And my doing it
For a
was
good
for hers.
reason.
Absolutely. So, and the point basically is this: after not even long, but once I started doing it, I started feeling something. Okay.
And you saw the reason for how your good feelings was because of that true love.
That's where the knowing came, because when the knowing, I started feeling something, and that opened the knowing, because it's the feeling. People are trying to do things, they're saying things that they want this, that, and the other, and they're not feeling it themselves. Okay, first of all, we have to,
Hmm.
and we do it from a certain state of consciousness too, from a certain point of respect, and the respect is not simply for someone else. We are not taught to respect ourselves. We're not taught to trust ourselves. We are prepared to set everything that all the effort we put into gaining some sense of reality and what is, over to someone else simply because they've got some credentials, they've got some initials in front of or behind their names, And today, more so than whenever I can tell, they could have just bought that for that matter. We've got
True.
we've got entire um, systems of thinking, especially in what's called higher learning. And I'll say it this way: it's not higher learning when the learning and the thing that's important is you being hireable and you getting a job or getting the most. When that is the focus, and knowing something, education is off the tracks. We
But you're
have,
not
yeah.
saying that education is a bad thing. You're not saying that. You're just saying, let's put it into context
I'm
of what's
talking.
important in a person's life.
No, actually, what you're saying is that education does not teach you to be a person. Education teaches
To
you
be
certain
loving,
knowledge that you might
yes.
be able to use as a trade, but
Well,
it
Right.
doesn't further your being a person.
education is, I'm going to use the word rife with misinformation. And the education process, even the idea that we are educated only when we go into an institution of, if I say higher learning, spell higher, HIRE, okay?
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. And the point of the matter is, okay,
Okay, yeah, I
all
get it.
right, okay. So the point of the matter is this: we enter the classroom on the first breath, we leave the classroom on the last. And the education process is about life itself. It's not about making a dollar. You can make a dollar, that's fine. And there's reason to talk about dollars, okay, in a different conversation, because it's not the dollars that you and I grew up thinking. And we do need to do something different along those lines, and we can talk about it. The issue is this: we 100% will leave this plane. We will disassociate from these forms at some point in what we consider time. That's a 100% a certainty. Now, the question is, how is it that we can go through an entire life and have so little understanding about who we are? Okay.
True.
And
You
this,
must, I have to say, you must be a person because I sense the kindred spirit here. I'm all about love and hope and positivity, and Malcolm knows this too. And it must be just very, very, very painful for you to be aware that there are so many people in this world that just don't know love. They don't know love from another. They don't know how to love themselves, and that just makes me so sad.
so then stop it. All right. The last thing, when you see, we'll connect, I'll send you a copy of the map of consciousness, and you'll start to seeing that word didn't exist this time last year. It existed after I finished creating the map itself. It fostered, it engendered its own term. And see, to take, I am not, I don't claim religious orientation, bias, or anything else. I welcome anyone who is positive, who is harmonious, because in our harmonies is where we will find our kindred and our kindredness. And the thing about it is that you can be in resonance with uh, someone who is in fear. I mean, and so therefore that those tribes will form. But
Attract.
exactly, like attracts like. So when you go down to a place of sadness and stuff like that, you're dimming your light in order to be with the dimness of others, when ultimately they need a beacon to, because it's in
Oh, good
everyone.
point. Okay.
It
Yeah, I
is
like that.
within everyone. And yet these become habits that we form. And of course, we're around people who are doing it, so they're going to just do it too. So ultimately, in the beginning, it will seem somewhat insensitive. However, our point here is not to feel bad for someone. And also, it is not to stop feeling for someone. Yes, I feel for everyone because I know I'm connected to everyone. I'm connected to everything. That includes I'm connected to the solutions to the problems that so many people are wondering about. We all have access to those solutions from a certain state of consciousness because our present state of consciousness that we habituate is keeping it hidden from us, even though it's pretty damn obvious to me and to others who already see it.
Okay, our
Well,
half
that's
hour,
manifesting the dream of MLK then, and
our
that's
half
exactly
hour
what
is
our
ending. At this
campaign
point,
is
one thing to
about.
think, well, one thing to, I agree with you. But the question is, how do you get this word out to other people? How do you get, and not that you want to convince other people, but how do you spread the word? My mom was saying, how do you spread the gospel? But it has nothing to do with religion, I'm saying. But
Uh,
how do you spread your, your view of life or your view of existence with other
Malcolm,
people to make it meaningful? That's I'm gonna end at that. We'll do other shows about that. But I
okay,
want to
and
thank you very much. And I am in total agreement with you. It's
I
but I'm
thank you. The only thing I was going to say is you may have something to do with that. The things that I have said, I have been honing, but no one is hearing this yet because it's even new to
I
me.
heard you. I heard you.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. So we're going to grow from here. We'll figure it out together. And I
yeah.
really thank you.
I mean, we can do it in certain things one person at a time, but there, as you say, there are 8 billion people,
Absolutely.
and
Let's
there are
all
many
think
different
love, everyone. Let's
and
think
there are
love.
many different languages.
Well,
And hopefully, as we're going on now, as we're progressing, as we're doing a podcasting, a Zoom casting, anybody can reach. You can reach people now,
there's some great things yet to share.
right?
And so we'll continue.
This is our pulpit, so to speak.
Okay.
Anyway, I thank you very much,
Thank you so much.
and you've been listening. You've been listening to Malcolm. You've been listening to Malcolm and we heard on MalcolmPresents.com. And have a great week. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it now.
Okay.
The objective of the organization We the World is to facilitate cooperation on a global scale amongst groups and individuals dedicated to implementing solutions to the many challenges we face on the planet at this time.